greatest symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hello and welcome to Arn. This is Paul Bromwell. Once again, Arn is not with us this week, but it's good. It's all good. We hope you enjoyed the interview last week, and Arn and Tully and Conrad, and we saw a lot of great feedback online. And so we hope you enjoyed that episode. Just wanted to give you a quick update on Arn before we kick off this episode. We're calling it the best of the Brain Busters. We've heard a lot of great feedback and saw a lot of great feedback on social with the comments of the time that Arn and I sat down and covered 1989, them joining the WWF and all the good stuff he and Tully did as the Brain Busters and some of the great matches. But Arn's doing much better. He just asked for one more week to rest his back. As you know, he and Brock are appearing this weekend as this episode drops at WrestleCade in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. If you have the opportunity to trot on down to Winston-Salem and it's close enough for you, I would tell you to get down there and make sure you take the opportunity to say hi to Arn, say hi to Brock. Brock's going to be in action. Arn's going to be in his corner. Arn and Brock and C.W. Anderson, the Anderson family, if you will, against the Dudleys, Devon and his boys. It's going to be a great time down there, so check it out. And Arn also wanted me to say that he hopes all of you had a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family and friends. And we are thankful for all of you, our audience. You have been a fantastic audience. It has been our pleasure to get to know some of you, especially through the questions and all the feedback that we get to hear and the feedback that Arn gets to hear at the meet and greets. And I've just had a tremendous year with Arn the last year and a half or so, getting to know him and getting to know all of you. And we're so grateful. I think that's the word I'm looking for your support and for all that you've done to support Arn in his career. So we hope you've had a great Thanksgiving weekend. Arn is going to be back. He told me, Paul, if I have to scratch and claw, we're coming back for new episodes starting next week. But in the meantime, please enjoy the best of the Brain Busters. It's Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard and their run through the WWF.
No, we were told when I got back and called the next day we were going to be in Philly, and we're wrestling the Midnight Express again in Philadelphia, for God's sakes. You know how excited all six of us were about that, obviously, right?
Sure.
You can just anticipate those people in Philadelphia who are blood and guts. They got four guys that are going to go out and give it to them, blood and guts. So that, we were all very, very excited about that. So anyway, I called Darso. He says, I'll get back in touch with you. We get to Philly, private plane. He says, okay, I just spoke to somebody in the office. Vince wants you to fly to Stamford in the morning. You'll have 2 plane tickets waiting for you at the airport. He'll have a limo pick you up, going to bring you to his house, and he'd like to talk to you guys. So we get up the next morning. We fly to New York. Limo picks us up, takes us to Vince's house. We're out by the pool, and we have our discussion. I'd love, Vince in those days could just have you floating on air. When he talked to you for 5 minutes, you'd just turn and walk off, and you'd feel like you were 3 feet above the ground. He had all your history. He had, all the accomplishments, and really was complimentary. And he asked us what we were going to make, or what we'd been making, excuse me. He said, what have you guys been making? And we told him, and he says, well, we don't have guaranteed contracts with my company. We have opportunity. He said, but I guarantee you guys will make more than you made with Crockett. So don't worry about that. And we took him at his word. And we agreed on a start date, and we asked him what he wanted us to do about the World Tag Titles. Did he want us just to turn them in? Or he said, no, what do you think you should do? And I said, well, Bobby Eaton and the Midnight Express are friends of mine, and they're business partners of mine, and I'd like to do the right thing. I'd like to drop the titles to Bobby myself, take the fall on me. So you do what you think is right, Arn. And that's, we got back to Philly, got down to the arena, went in, and we had a talk with Dusty, and I told him that's what I'd like to do. And he said, fine.
Let's pump the brakes right there for a minute. I want to clarify this meeting with Vince and Stanford by the pool. This is happening the morning of the Philadelphia show. The Philadelphia show's at night, right?
Correct.
When you're meeting with Vince by the pool, I know you don't get any specifics about cash, but does he give you any specifics about dates? Because in that era, they were madmen running shows 2 times a day sometimes and running 2 and 3 crews. Road Warrior is an understatement for what the schedule was back then. Is that discussed at all at that point?
Well, no, it did not go into it at all. And to be honest with you, I said earlier that it was a huge consideration on me staying with Crockett because I had, it had come through the grapevine. Not only were they making huge money through their marketing and through the houses and all that, they were also running 3 towns a night and they're working their ass off. And we all knew that. But for the first time in my life, I had been insulted professionally. I felt like I had been used and abused, believe it or not. And you look at it on face value, going out and having a 4-minute match with Dr. Death Steve Williams and getting beat right in the middle of the ring should not be a big deal. Had the timing not been what it was and the issues not been what they were and the sovereignty, if that's the correct word, of the company being at stake. Because let me tell you, when Steve Williams beat me, the roof did not come off the place. There was like a look of disbelief in the audience of, well, why the hell did they do that?
Right.
And so I didn't think when I made that decision to go see Vince the next day, I did not even consider the number of days I would be working, which was probably one of the bigger mistakes I made. But I had to trust my gut on this situation. And at that point in time, I was just pissed and felt disrespected. And I hadn't felt that, if at all, to that degree since I'd been in the business. And if I had, I didn't remember when.
Did you discuss creative with Vince at all? Did he say, I've got some ideas in mind, or what about this, or what about that? Any sort of creative, or does Bobby Heenan even come up at that point?
He did not come up. He just said, I'd like to use y'all as a team. He said, it's not broke. I'm not going to mess with it. And that was another concern that I had, that he was really big into gimmicks and characters and all that he was going to try to put something on us that we couldn't pull off. He said, you guys don't worry about it. I'm going to leave you just as you are because it's not broke.
So you come back, you go to Philadelphia, you get to the building. You and Tully have got to be on cloud 9. Is the first person you tell, do you give Jim Cornette or your buddy Bobby Eaton or Ric Flair a heads up, or is the first person you tell Dusty Rhodes?
Out of respect for Dusty, went in. And again, remember, I didn't have the conversation with Dusty the previous night about the Steve Williams. I had it with Jimmy.
Right. And Jimmy put all the heat on Dusty.
Yes. Whether or not that was true or not, I don't know. But I went in, and out of respect for Dusty and everything he had done for me the previous years, 3 years, whatever it had been, I went in and told him what we were doing, and I think he knew. When you pull Tully Blanchard off of a plane and have him flying commercial to towns, you got to know that something is going to be rumbling, and there had to be in those days some repercussions, whether it was going to be Tully was going to get fired, when we were going to move on, that was the next step, or there was going to be a pushback. But you had to know something was coming. I doubt very seriously if Dusty ever in his wildest dreams thought we would leave. And it wasn't based on that one event. You got to back up and remember 11-7, that number should stick in your head, because that was the first time I was ever disrespected and lied to with no light at the end of the tunnel. The other half of that payoff, for some reason to this day, has really nagged at me. And you couple that with just a random squash job, it wouldn't have mattered who my opponent was. It could have been Dusty. It could have been anybody. It didn't matter. To do it at that time was just, in my mind, saying, I can do anything I want, and this is what we're doing just because. You guys need to cool your jets. that's the way I took it.
Well, let's talk about your time there. All the differences that we've broken down so far with fan questions. You mentioned a minute ago that you showed up to your first TV and sort of laid out what that scene was like. I've got your entire schedule, which is pretty crazy, in front of me. You really were all over the place. Fort Wayne, Indiana was filmed on October 5th, 1988. It aired on October 22nd. Your first match in the company is you guys teaming up, of course, with Bobby Heenan in your corner to defeat Tommy Angel and Bob Emery in 2 minutes and 31 seconds. Prior to the bout, Heenan introduced you both as the newest members of the Heenan family, and you're billed here as the Brain Busters. Boy, you're off to a hell of a start. You got a cool name, and they didn't change your look. You're not in silly costumes. They didn't put a bird on your shoulder or a snake in your bag. So that's all looking pretty good. And then you get Bobby Heenan. We're clicking on all cylinders so far.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing I'll never say is we weren't used properly, and we weren't given a goofy gimmick or goofy costuming. Other than being able to do this, which would have blew the roof off the house. I'm sorry. A lot of fans watch both shows.
Right.
So it's not like they didn't know what we were doing, but they were doing this for like 3 weeks or a month. But when we didn't give it back to them, they gave up. Because every time for the past 3 years, they had done this, we did this back to them, or that one. But to just ignore it, they just, after a while, they just went, shit, they're not giving it back to us. So piss on it, we'll stop doing it.
Luke wants to know, prior to your coming in here, had you ever even met Bobby Heenan?
No, but what a wonderful experience I had after I met him. We've talked about this, Conrad. He's the most quick-witted, funny, hilarious guy you will ever meet. It doesn't matter. You can walk up to Bobby, having not seen him for 2 weeks, and just walk up and just grab your belt buckle and turn it up and go, Bobby, what do you think of this belt buckle? And before you could get buckle out of your mouth, he had a jab at you. That's something funny. And, he was so quick. It amazed me how quick the guy was. Brilliant, I would say.
Here's one about the Heenan family. David says, during your first year with the WWF, if you time traveled to today to bring back one wrestler to join the Heenan family, who would it be and why? So the gist is, who in today's wrestling world would have been a good fit with the Heenan family back in 88, 89?
In today's group of talent?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Just because of the hodgepodge of different personalities and everybody being different. How about John Moxley?
Oh, I could see that. That'd be fun.
He could be the lunatic, which is what he is anyway.
Works for me. Josh White wants to know, is there anybody who showed hostility towards you or Tully when you first were coming in? I'm assuming with you guys being such a hot team from a rival company, you may have had some issues.
Not to our face, and here's what may have helped us. Just to be perfectly honest with you. I never had a beef with just a handful of guys the entire time I've been in the business. And at that time, I had no beefs with anybody working there. But Tully and I pull up to Fort Wayne, Indiana, I believe it was, our first television taping, and get our bags out of the trunk. We're walking in the back door, and we see this commotion. And at that moment in time that we came through the back door was when the Rougeaus had their deal with the Bulldogs, the sucker punch. Jacques hit him with a roll of quarters, I think, knocked some of Bulldog's teeth out, and the shit hit the fan. I mean, it was like a movie. We walk in the back door, shit starts blowing up. Had nothing to do with us, obviously, but I guess there had been some ribbing going on in the locker room and some stuff that wasn't, had really built to a crescendo, and it blew up this day at TV. And I guess there was a big talent meeting right away, and any more ribbing or any more anything, and guys are going to lose their job. It got serious. So if anybody was planning anything for us, it probably got the kibosh along with everything else that day.
Let's do a question here from Jason. He says, who came up with the entrance? I have no recollection of him or Tully ever jogging to the ring in the NWA. I don't think you did that every time in the WWF, but I did see it a few times. Is that more of a production element where you just need the timing of the show? And if there's not music or whatever, maybe that makes sense. Or was there more to it than that?
I don't remember, but if I was guessing, we probably didn't have much time.
Right.
And that was a way to gain a minute and a half,
yeah.
You know, and in a minute and a half, that's a lot of TV time. If you make it pay off for you, that's the first thing comes to mind. I don't think anyone would have told us, you know, get on down there or hey, let's try this, let's jog to the ring. Because if you flip the coin, the Rockers always ran to the ring.
Right.
So it wouldn't have been, okay, you know, I just don't think it was planned. I think it was more that we didn't have much time. Let's get down there and make it pay some dividends.
Talk about the WWF, man. I'm pretty excited to talk about this. We just talked a lot with Tully Blanchard about how it all came together and why you left. I want to sort of fill in the middle, but usually what we do on this show every other week is we throw the keys to the show to our listeners. And I want to start with that. Instead of finishing with fan questions, let's start with fan questions. And we've got a ton. There's no way we'll get to all of them, but let's jump in here. Big Extra has a question that everybody wants to know. Why did the Brainbusters never have an entrance theme?
Well, wow. You know, we never had music up until we went to the ring with Rick and they played his music. We never had a set of entrance music. So it was another day at the office. However, on their show, where most of the talent that were going to be featured did have music, correct? Didn't they at that time?
Yeah, almost everybody. I think the only other talent who didn't have music in the WWF at the time was Andre the Giant. So for you to not have entrance music was definitely different.
Yeah, and with a show that was so high on production values and making it a big deal and feeling like, oh, this is a huge thing, pyro blowing up, music, you know, that's one way you can look at it. And you can look at it if the announcers would have told the story, which I don't think they did, is it's different. And if Andre was the only other one that didn't have music, that puts us in the exclusive group and it makes it different. And it's like we're all business from the minute you come through the curtain to the minute you go back through the curtain. That could have been easily sold.
Arn, we're going to pause and talk about our favorite sponsor once again this week. That's right, it's Blue Chew time. And they're here to make sure you're delivering that spine buster, putting that spine to the pine every single time the right way, and making sure you're prepared to do so. And they have a special offer for the listeners of the Arn Show. Isn't that right, Arn? Arn? Well, guys, Arn's not around right now. I think he's taking care of business, if you know what I mean. And I want to make sure you have the opportunity to take care of business too. Guys, Blue Chew is an online prescription service. No visits to the doctor's office. We talk about it every single week. No weird conversations. You don't have to wait in line at the pharmacy. And remember, the biggest perk and benefit of this, it ships right to your door in a discreet package. So listen, go to bluechew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers. They're just going to ask you a few questions, make sure you're good, your health's in order, and you can take it. And once they verify that, it's going to be at your door within days, all done online, very easy. And if you don't like swallowing pills, no big deal. The tablets are chewable, very easy to consume. So give it a try, guys. Listen, we hear a lot of folks that listen to our show that have reached out to us directly through our show DMs and said, guys, you are spot on with what you've been talking about with Blue Chew. We have a lot of fun with it on the show, but I'm telling you, it takes away the worries, the anxiety, the stress, and helps you perform the way you want to perform, like a Hall of Famer like Arn Anderson. So there you go. Check it out. BlueChew.com can make sure you're able to perform at your very best every time. You get the opportunity to have fun. And here's a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code ARN. That's right, just those 3 letters, ARN, at checkout. You just pay $5 shipping. That's it. BlueChew.com, promo code ARN to receive your first month free. Once again, go to BlueChew.com for more details and safety info. This will be your first match back in the heart of Crockett country. Listen to this. You and Tully return to the Greensboro Coliseum, the unofficial home of Jim Crockett, and let's face it, the 4 Horsemen. And for the WWF, this is an A-Town card for one reason and one reason only. Hulk Hogan is working the main event. He's teaming with Hercules, and they're taking on Virgil and Ted DiBiase. Here's what this card looked like. You ready? It's Sam Houston defeating Steve Lombardi. The Barbarian pinned Boris Zukov. They're no strangers to Crockett country. You have Dino Bravo defeating Jim Duggan. That's a count out. You have yourself and Tully defeating, yes, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. Talk about an awesome tag match right there at the end of the month. Jim Powers defeating Conquistador #1, who is Jose Luis Rivera. You have the Red Rooster pinning Hillbilly Jim. And as I said, Hulk Hogan and Hercules defeating Ted DiBiase and Virgil. And I want to make a comment here. Bruce Pritchard on Something to Wrestle has argued over and over again that Hulk Hogan could sell out houses in the 1980s. I mean, even Paulie B from Pittsburgh, let alone any other talent, could have been on that card. But as long as Hogan's on the card, Arn, it's going to sell out. And I'm being tongue in cheek here, but seriously, Bruce argues that the power of Hulkamania was a real thing. But on this night, 2,000 people showed up in Greensboro. Less than 2 months earlier, 10,000 people came to see the Horsemen and the rest of the Jim Crockett Promotions crew. I know you're a proud North Carolinian at this point, and quite frankly, an expert on Greensboro. Is this just the wrong venue for WWF? And what I mean by that is this the case of, hey, we just don't want to see it, we're loyal to Crockett?
Bingo. They're probably still reeling from Tully and I leaving. I would imagine they were mad at Tully and I for leaving, disappointed for Tully and I in leaving. I would suggest probably the Greensboro dozen were still on the front row. I don't know, but I imagine they might have been there that night. I don't know if they were or not. All of our buddies in their suits, the Greensboro crew. But they were, just like they had their up northern and northeastern fans that were cold to us.
Yeah.
They were cold that night, and it was just more out of a curiosity. But that was Crockett country. That was Horseman country.
Yeah.
So all we could do, in that situation, you know what you can do, Paul? You can go, well, shit. Or you can go out and tear the joint down. And I assure you, for 20 minutes, we tore the joint down with the rockers.
Yeah, that's where I was headed. Even if this card failed to draw, this is the first night that you guys work with Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, the Rockers, when they were in AWA, the Midnight Rockers. And as we know, they did all right in this business, Arn, especially Shawn, who even Ric Flair calls the best in-ring performer of all time. But it's pretty cool here. You're working with Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty first month in WWF. That's pretty cool when I saw that.
And it caught on, trust me. We would be working with them quite a bit after that.
I'm fascinated by your run here, man, because here you are, the home of Starrcade. You're back home. You're taking on two of the all-time greats in Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels. And 2 days later, you're in Columbus, Ohio, and you're going to pick up a win against the British Bulldogs, Davey Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid. I imagine by this point in 88, Dynamite's probably hurting pretty good. What do you remember about working the Bulldogs?
Yeah, I mean, those guys were well established. I know Barry Darso of Demolition really enjoyed working with those guys. You know, they were very physical, but very talented. But, you know, we caught them kind of towards the end of their run. They were on their way out. I think they were probably working a notice. And I guess the best thing you could take from that is they were business all the way. I had heard, you know, Barry talk about what good guys those guys were. And Dynamite Kid was one that he kind of broke the mold about how big you got to be in this business, which I've always contested don't matter. If you're solid in your work ethic and you're believable, nobody's going to question 5 minutes into a match how tall you are. And he was one of those classic examples of guys that broke through that barrier and made it available for other small guys to be accepted in the business, I think.
It's so fascinating that you're seeing this right before they leave. I mean, a month later, they're out of there, but you can at least say you got to work with the Bulldogs. And it's just a couple of days after you worked with the Rockers. You're going to get a lot of TV time in early November. Or I guess you filmed it in Toronto in early November, but it doesn't air until after the first of the year. But they let you go over 12 minutes on primetime wrestling, which in that era is a long match. It's you and Tully, of course, picking up a win over Jim Powers and Paul Roma. Blanchard is the illegal man here, and he's going to pin Powers with a sunset flip off the top and a clothesline from Arn Anderson, of course. But 12 minutes on primetime TV, not a big deal for you. You'd been doing it on Turner Station for a long time, but this isn't Challenge or Superstars. It's not syndicated. This is their flagship show. And to get featured there with a 12-minute match, that lets you know they've got big plans for you, right?
Yeah. And at that point, we had already gained their confidence that we could pull it off. We're all about business, bell to bell. And that never changed, never wavered. It's what we did.
You did a Superstars taping where you guys picked up a win in 2 minutes and 15 seconds over David Isley and Rusty Riddle. Blanchard gets the win here with a slingshot suplex. Was it ever discussed you guys using different style or different finishing maneuvers at all? Or just, hey, do your thing?
We already had them over. Why switch?
You mentioned earlier that they came up with the idea to put Bobby the Brain Heenan with you, which helped you kind of figure out your tag team name. Do you know who they was? Was it a Vince idea? Was it do you remember who said, hey, we're going to pair you guys with, because you had talked to Vince around the pool originally.
Yep. That was his decision to be made. Bruce Pritchard had a lot of stroke at that time on creative, and Pat Patterson obviously had a lot of stroke. I don't know, coming up with names, I don't know who would have been responsible. They didn't ask us. They just said, you're with Bobby and you're going to be called the Brainbusters. Gotcha. And when they were that definitive, I said, yes, I am. Good.
You got it. That's
Works
right.
for me.
Yep. Keep signing those paychecks. Now, was Vince or anyone else aware of the reputation you and Tully had as talkers? So when you're having conversations, signing contracts, does that come up at all? Like, hey, we've seen what you guys can do promo-wise. Is that ever discussed?
Well, no. I'm sure Jack Lanza, who I created a relationship with right away, I'm sure would have told me. The thing is, you had to be very careful that walking in the door at that time, that they just didn't start shoving you to the moon, because it would have buried you with the other guys. And in those days, promos were very, very short. And that everybody's pretty much was, because you had to leave room for the Hogan promos that took forever, and the Ultimate Warriors that took forever, and the Savages. So farther down the food chain, which we were, you had less time. And Bobby, if he didn't talk, he didn't get heat. So he needed to do some talking. And it was more important that we gelled with him doing the talking, even though I was dying to do about a 2.5 minute promo. And let the world know why we were there. and what our intentions were. Man, I was chomping at the bit. But you have, that's playing the game. I don't know that I ever, the 14 months I was there, had more than 30 seconds of a promo.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say is you can see the difference immediately of a Crockett promo versus the WWF where, like you said, 30 to 45 seconds and an inset while you're wrestling in the screen in the top left versus getting behind the booth for, a good 3 minutes and letting it rip.
Paul, give us three minutes for Tully and I to do our thing. Let us walk in the door. We made the mistake of walking in the door. I want to say it was the second week of TV. And these went up, and the crowd came out of their seats, and they went, wow. They all had the four fingers up in the air. And when we came back through the curtain, they were waiting on us.
Oh,
hey, guys.
No more.
That shit is over. If we would have been able to do that, call us the Horsemen,
yeah,
put us with Bobby, would have been just fine, and let us talk, they would have had main event players added to their list that day.
Immediately.
We didn't need to go start over and get over. We were already over.
And I'm glad you said that because I was wondering, did you feel that the reaction was good and you said it, you guys were over. So there you go. Okay. So here we go. No music, nylon jackets, plain boots, plain trunks. You've said previously, Vince promised to not change your presentation, keeping you entirely realistic. Was this all agreed about around the pool or is this after WWF knew you were coming in?
I don't think we discussed presentation. That would have been over the phone a couple times, and it wouldn't have been with Vince. It would have been with Bruce or somebody else. All we asked was just don't make clowns out of us. Don't change up our, because he was notorious. And us saying to him, all we asked is, Vince, we're not a cartoon. We're going to lend credibility to your company. We're going to go out there every night and give you something that you cannot see through. And I know entertainment is a huge part of your business and your company, but just let us be us and we'll go get over. That's all we need. Just let's don't make a cartoon out of us. That would have normally been something that right away he would have sent us through the curtain and made a fool out of us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because we asked him don't.
So the one thing that
well, and he never did. I go back, Brainbusters, that's not a cartoon name. It was with Bobby, which was Bobby.
Made sense.
Brother, once they started the weasel stuff, you were pretty much set for crowd reaction.
Set. Oh, yeah, yeah. And, perfect pairing with him, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. So that's one thing I could say, because, they could dress you up in some goofy costumes and, put a dinosaur around
Make you a rooster.
Make you a rooster. And there's a guy, Terry Taylor, who could really work, could really perform. He's out there clucking like a chicken, which it was just a rib on Terry.
Right. You didn't get polka dots? So you guys lucked out, man. You really did when you look back at it. They were true to you. So there's a lot to be thankful for that because you're absolutely right. You guys could have ended up with anything.
Yeah. So. I mean, when you leave the one place, when there's two places and you leave that one and go to the next one, you're pretty much at their mercy.
You got it. And you mentioned before the one thing that you weren't supposed to do, you just shared with us, it was the four fingers. Don't throw those up in the air.
Yeah, and hey, I think it was the second TV, and it could have even been that same, I don't know, yeah, it wasn't the same night, but it would have been the next TV taping, I want to say. And God almighty, because by then they had one television show that they saw us on. Word was probably spreading through, just pick up the phone and go, God almighty, did you watch WWF TV? Guess who was on there? That's how it spread back then. That and just word of mouth.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed in the match is you do the spine buster, Tully then does the slingshot suplex. Eventually you guys would change it up to that spike pile driver, which would come later. So talk about the decision there. starting with kind of that as the move set to close the match versus what you transitioned to eventually? Who kind of changed that, or did you guys come up with that on your own?
We did. We came up with that because we knew we could pull it off safely with everybody. And we wanted to be, we didn't dress exactly alike every night. Same color scheme. He might have on red, I might have on black, I might have on white, he might have on red and white, whatever. But we wanted to look like a team in every way, and having a teamwork finish back in the day, in that time period, is what teams did. So that's the reason we came up with, other than two separate moves, the spine bust or the pile driver, spike pile driver.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We all remember that move for sure. Final question before we move on to kind of going through the rest of the month, and that is, I'm sure you come in, lots of familiar faces in WWF when you guys make your debut. You shared the story with the Rougeaus and the Bulldogs, which is insane. But what else was kind of that first day like? Did you encounter the boss? What was the mood like outside of the fight that you guys saw? Did you run into former colleagues? Anything you can share with us what it was like when you first started getting to travel with WWF again?
Well, what's funny is, Barry Darsow was a really good friend of mine, part of Demolition. And, we were really good friends. And so we knew we were going to be working with them. So that was a great opportunity for us to catch up and all those things. Funny, that night, because we wanted to, get to know the boys, let the boys know that that we're good guys. After Tommy got his teeth knocked out and all that stuff settled down, and they sent everybody involved back to the hotel, hey, you guys get out of here, you're done for the night, whatever. Tully and I go in to have a couple drinks in the day. That's how you met the boys that you didn't know and create, a relationship, get off the get-go, and guys drank back then. We walk in, and there they are. There's the Bulldogs over there. And I went over and ordered some kamikazes. Took one to him, one to Davy Boy, one to Tully, one to me. Shot him down. Well, it had split Tommy's lip and inside on his gum, I think, or something, the punch. Whether there was an international object involved, I do not know. But anyway, he had a split mouth, and when he drank that kamikaze, it started burning.
Oh, my God.
Which I started laughing, and then he started laughing. And so only one thing to do then, we probably had 3 or 4 more apiece, 6 or 8 beers, and we made a friendship right there with those guys, although it would be temporary because they weren't going to be there much longer.
No, they weren't. Well, there you go. I'm already making friends, Arn and Tully, in the Federation. So, Arn, we talked about the travel schedule and moving across the country. You would continue to move on out west. November 15th, you're from the sold-out Cow Palace in San Francisco. 14,600 fans with 12,200 paid. They watched a full day of television tapings for primetime wrestling and superstars. And for your part, the Brainbusters wrestled the Rockers to a no contest when all 4 of you brawled on the floor before the match ever made it to the ring. The segment did not air until December because of the crazy amount of syndicated TV that WWF provided. This is the second time since entering the company that you would work with Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels. How fast did you and Tully realize that the Rockers were a team you wanted to face?
Well, I remember this one clearly, and we already knew just the one match. So, we said to each other, coming through the curtain, can't wait to work a program with those guys. This particular fight started kind of just out of nowhere, and there wasn't much to it, to be honest with you. It was just a quick in and out, so it was just a teaser to probably keep us on TV and keep those guys on TV till they could get to having us an angle.
So for you, you would say the chemistry with those guys was almost instantaneous.
It's instantly.
Yeah.
Instantly. Yeah. I mean, those guys, they listened, they learned, they were incredible.
We want to pause this episode of Arn to talk to you about something Arn and I are very passionate about, and that's sleep quality. And if you're waking up too hot or too cold, we highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. They're inspired by NASA. Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. Did you know that traditional bed sheets can harbor more bacteria than a toilet seat? That's freaking gross. That can lead to acne, allergies, and stuffy noses, and that's awful. Nobody wants that. Miracle Made offers a whole line of self-cleaning, eco-friendly bedding, such as sheets, pillowcases, and comforters, and it prevents 99% of bacteria and requires 3 times less laundry. The self-cooling properties for better quality sleep are where it's at. They use silver-infused fabrics, as I said, inspired by NASA. And the Miracle Made sheets are thermo-regulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long. You've heard Arn and I talk about it before. We like it cold and dark in the rooms. That's how the Horsemen liked it after they were done a busy night. And that's how you'll enjoy it too. And you can get it right here. Again, very clean, bacteria-free. So go to trymiracle.com/Arn to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code ARN at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20% off. Listen, Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you're going to get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made right now. Go to trymiracle.com/Arn and use the code ARN to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Arn and treat yourself to a great night's sleep. And we want to thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode of The Arn Show.
Let's talk about when you're working with Brett, because it happens next in the Meadowlands, December 18th, 1988. The Brainbusters and the Heart Foundation. Did you have a preference working with the Rockers or working with the Heart Foundation?
If I had my druthers, I would rotate between the Rock and Roll Express and the Rockers every other day for my entire career.
Wow. That's awesome.
I'm not speaking down about Brett and Neidhart. They were tremendous performers, and they were a great team, and they knew each other, and there were such a contrast between their styles. Your best teams to me were the ones that had totally different styles, but they just meshed and they catered to each other. But when you've had the experience of the Rock and Roll Express and the Rockers, they're just special. And they'll be talking about those matches, I hope, 20 years from now.
Oh, they will. I'm glad to see you guys are starting off 89 in my home state here in Huntsville, Alabama. January 3rd is the first time you guys win a match with a spike pile driver, as far as I know. That's for a Superstars taping. It'll air later that same month. The next day, you're down in Birmingham, only a couple hours away. This is a wrestling challenge taping. It's going to air in February. And again, the spike pile driver. How did that evolve into being your new finish maneuver here?
We talked about it, and assuming that we were going to be working with Demolition, we thought it made sense to have a high impact finish that involved both of us. So should it come up, that would be something believable that you could use on Demolition down the road. Makes sense?
It does. I like it a lot.
You never thought about it that way, did you?
I have not.
There was actually a thought process and a conversation and method to the madness.
Let's talk about SummerSlam. It is your next big event. Again, another sellout, the Meadowlands, August 28th. You're in the opening match, defending your tag titles against the Hart Foundation. I love this match. I don't know why Meltzer didn't. He only gave it 2 stars. I thought it was fantastic. I thought your work in particular in this one really, really stood out. I love the way you do the illegal tag, and when you make the cover, you cover your head up with your arm and your opponent's arm to, disguise the fact that it's you and not Tully. really a great match. I loved your stuff with the Hart Foundation. I go back and watch this at least once a year. What did you think about it?
I was a sneaky bastard, wasn't I?
Yes, you were and are.
And am. Yeah. Well, those guys, they were great to work with, and we had enough time. I would have liked to have done the spike pile driver for the finish just because it was stronger way to beat Brett, to be honest with you. The finish that was came up with, it was just so, and it wasn't as impactful. Would love to have done our finish. It just, when you beat a guy with your best stuff, it's better for him. I'm not a big fan of a schoolboy or a roll up or anything. And, if you're going to beat me with your best stuff. And that would have been our best stuff at the time. But we had a fresh crowd. It was early and nothing had been seen hardly yet. So we got them at the right time. And I think the crowd reaction was pretty good.
No doubt about it.
What's your favorite story of Andre? Do you have a favorite Andre the Giant story?
Oh, gosh. Well, there was a story that didn't become a story, but could have became a story. This falls into what if column, okay?
Okay.
Tully and I went up to wrestle. And if not our very first house show, I want to say it would have been one of them. Andre, before he would wrestle every night, would get one of the boys and he would play cribbage or he would play cards before his match. And he'd do a little drinking. Now, a little drinking for him would probably be 3-4 bottles of wine before his match. That would be enough to pass the rest of us out. So they're playing, and I forget I think he was playing with Arnold Skolin. And Tully, not meaning any harm or anything, he just went down to the far end of the table and was going to, I don't know, I think he was just going to do some tricep presses. He's warming up for our match. Well, as he leaned on that table to do some presses, it wasn't secured, and it scooted, and there went a bottle of wine full, flipping and exploding on the floor. You could have heard a pin drop. There was a referee walking by. I went and got him, and I said, "Oh, Jesus, come with me. Do we have a runner here?" And I went and got $100, gave it to the ref. I said, "Go get Andre as many bottles of whatever he's drinking as this will buy." And I think it bought maybe 4 bottles. He wasn't drinking the real expensive stuff. Bought 3 or 4 bottles, and I said, "Tell Andre I'm on it. Just go up and whisper him to him. Just say Arn is on it." Sent a runner down. They came in. A couple guys cleaned up the wine. Andre never said a thing. He's still playing cribbage or whatever it was. The guy brought the wine in. I brought it in. Now, by now, Tully realized what happened. He was back in our locker room. He didn't know what to do. I brought the wine in, sat it on the table, 4 bottles, didn't say a word, didn't look Andre in the eye, walked out, and what could have been a disaster was never a thing. Not a word was said.
Arn Anderson, save the day, baby.
Yeah, I knew what it took to fix that one, that's for sure.
So if that doesn't happen, I mean, is Andre come to our heads rolling? I mean, is it an ugly scene? What do we get here out of Andre?
Well, if nobody took responsibility and made it right, he probably wouldn't have done a thing. Then, better not ever end up in the ring where he is, because he would not have forgot it. It would have been a classic show of disrespect.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the way he would have taken it. And it wouldn't, I mean, it purely was just a not thinking accident by Tully. But in those days, Tully had a reputation for a little heat in the locker room, which is probably why he was such a great heel in the ring. That's who he was.
Yeah, and again, that would have been kind of the last thing, already having that reputation that Tully would want to have to deal with in that case with Andre the Giant, right? Oh, I also accidentally smashed your bottle of wine. Not a good look for Tully.
No, it was one of those things that everyone knew what just happened. Now let's see how everybody handles it. And, you know, in this business, back then, when you walked into that locker room, or really any locker room back when we were still in the territory days, it was a room full of grown-ass men with mores and different things in place that had always been that weren't necessarily talked about. Locker room etiquette is what we call it. There was just things that happened, and there are ways that you handle it, and you work, you know. And people in those days, it's like you could leave and walk out of a locker room if you had been in a territory for a certain amount of time. You could walk in, open your bag, look around the locker room, say you've been around that group of guys 6 months. Everybody's pretty much established themselves as one way or the other in the rest of the locker room's mind. To say there were thieves in the business is a horrible thing to talk about, that you can't even go to the ring and feed your family and come back without your valuables being safe. And 9.9 times out of 10, it was. But it was an occasional thief. Locker room etiquette would just say, when you go to the ring, have your stuff put up somewhere where it's not in plain sight. Don't tempt anybody.
Yeah, and I can imagine not every locker room you go to had lockers with locks and all that stuff, right? I mean, it's just
None
out
of
there.
them. None of them.
Okay.
You came in, you got a chair, you threw a towel over your chair, you put your boots in front of the chair, and for that night, that was your space. That was it. You don't take anybody's chair.
So your shit's just out there. Anybody could mess with it if they really want to.
Yeah. You know, everybody had, you know, nice watches and wedding rings and, you know, chains, you know, crosses and stuff, and some cash, and everything was a credit card back then. So it was just locker room etiquette. And going back to the Andre thing, how that was handled, there were a lot of eyes on it. And it was what was said and what wasn't said that the veterans looked at and went, okay, that's one fire put out. Because if Andre would have went off, say it wouldn't have been handled right, everybody in that locker room would have suffered.
Oh, I'm sure.
Not just the people directly involved.
There you go. Arn saves the day.
There it is. Saturday night's main event, number 22. It's filmed on the 18th. It airs on the 29th on NBC. This is the 2 out of 3 falls match where Arn and Tully win the tag titles from Demolition. Smash pins Anderson in pinfall number 1. In pinfall number 2, the champs are disqualified for continuously double teaming after ramming Heenan into a ring post and hitting the decapitation on Blanchard. Late in the fall, though, Andre the Giant pops up ringside, and Anderson then pins Smash at 12:33 once Blanchard hit Smash in the back of a head that was with a chair that was thrown in by Andre. And it's a big celebration. Backstage, you're with Jesse Ventura. Rick Rude's there. Haku's there. Of course, Andre's there. Everybody's celebrating with the Heenan family. And the Brainbusters are tag champs on NBC, no less. It's a big deal.
Bet your ass. The only negative that came from that is Tully laid that chair in on Barry and gave him a concussion.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. He you know, and I'm sure Barry, the kind of performer he is, he looked at Tully and said beforehand, hey, hit me, because we're getting beat here. I want something substantial. But, you know, there's really no way with a guy's laying in the position he was, because he hit him in the back of the head. You know, there's no way to judge it. There's no way to protect yourself. It's a steel chair. Something people don't understand. You can say and do what you want. It's a steel chair. And it knocked him cuckoo, and he had some issues, I think, for a while after that. And him being as good a friend as he is of mine, that took a little bit of the joy out of it.
I want to mention 4 months after this, you guys are out of here. When you win the belts in July, you're gone in November, and you were working out like a 90-day notice. So you're putting in notice like just a month after winning the belts.
Yep. And if you go back, you know, the thing about it is, Conrad, you know, you've named all these towns and what the houses were and the dates.
Yeah.
And how many people were there.
Yeah.
How could we be 50 grand behind what we had made with Crockett at that point in the fiscal year?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't because the business was down.
Yeah.
So when you ask that question, there's probably two answers.
Right.
One would be, oh God, I had no idea. I'll fix that. Or, oh, well, shit happens. And we got the, oh, well, shit happens. So
that's it. That's all there is to say.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't because business wasn't right. And, you know, if you're the tag champions, you know, which are not paid like a single main event.
Right.
It's split 4 ways versus 2 ways.
Right.
So you're not going to make singles money no matter where your position if you're in a tag. And we figured out 3 weeks later when we were told, okay, let me research this. I'll get back to you at the next TV taping. And it was a no-go on catching us up to where we needed to be so we could go forward the rest of the year. So we turned in our notice. That's how that happened.
There's a new sheriff in town. Jim Crockett Promotions is no more. Now it's been purchased by Ted Turner. He's rebranded it World Championship Wrestling. Dusty Rhodes, instead of being sort of the top booker, the guy you gave notice to, now he's actually working with you in the WWF. And instead, a new guy is riding roughshod named Jim Herd. And his tenure, I think, started in January of '89. What were you hearing through the grapevine about the opportunities or what was different? You know, you were probably still talking to Ric Flair, I would guess. Were you in touch with anybody else that was still in Atlanta?
Well, let me just say this and then let me back up for a minute, because the cleverness and cunning of Vince McMahon is unprecedented, unchallenged. And I'll get to that in just a second. He's in a league by himself. Let's just say that we had a couple of options. We could either go to Japan, we could go back to WCW, which Rick had brokered the deal with Jim Herd to bring us back for 3 years, $250,000 a year, which was quite a bit more than we were making with WWF. Okay. When Tully went home and Haku stepped into that spot, we were working with Demolition those weeks on the go home in a pretty good spot. I think we're probably next to last or something. Here's where the cleverness comes in. All of a sudden, now Tully's gone. I got like 6 weeks left. I'm on my way out. My money almost doubled. I went to Barry. I went, man, these payoffs are great. Good God. What the hell happened? He said, mine's not great. So then we started comparing notes. He was paying me twice as much as Haku twice as much as Demolition. And for the next 6 weeks, it was like I was brought in to work with Hulk Hogan. When the math all shook out at the end of the fiscal year, I actually had made more money than I made with Jim Crockett.
Wow.
That was his way of showing me, I told you, stick with me. I would make it right. I can make this right anytime I want. And that's the message that it sent, and it was loud and clear. It didn't make me feel like I'd made the wrong decision. It just pissed me off with, well, then why didn't you?
Right.
You know, if you could do this any time, if you would have done this 3 months ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and you'd have a couple of lifers. But that was just how cunning and devious that the guy was. And, you know, for those last 6 weeks, it picked me right up and put me over the top.